Good afternoon. My name is Sola Magaji, and I am very honored to be part of Women's Ascension IWD Conference 5.0, celebrating International Women's Month of March 2026. So I'll be talking about eliminating discriminatory laws, gender equality and women's empowerment, and human rights protection. And I'll be looking at this from three pillars, from justice, economic, and digital inclusion. So these three pillars, they work hand in hand together. We need for us to actually gain the kind of momentum we're seeking for when it comes to gender equality and women's rights. We need to work on these three pillars to ensure that we need to work on these three pillars to improve women's inclusion and women's equality. So when we look at the justice pillar, the things we need to be looking at are the legal protections. We need to ensure that there are no discriminatory laws in our constitutions, our penal codes. We need to adopt protections for GBV and ensure constitutional alignment. So harmonization between the constitution, customary, traditional, religious laws, and ensure that none of these actually discriminate against women. We need to look at the enforcement gaps, because even though for most countries now, gender equality is embedded in their constitution, but when it comes to implementation and access, there's still significant gaps. So promoting alternative dispute resolution mechanisms which are friendly to women is key. Gender responsive policing, training judiciary and police and our law enforcement agencies to handle cases without bias and to adopt survivor-centric approaches, ensuring that our regulatory and legal frameworks protect women's rights to own property, addressing inheritance customs which prevent women from inheriting property, even divorce customs which prevents women from accessing communal properties in the case of divorce, and increasing women's representation and voice in the law enforcement, legal, and judiciary sectors. When it comes to economic and financial inclusion, the data is there. It says it's all. What are the key barriers preventing women from accessing finance? Collateral requirements. When many women, due to traditions or customs, are barred from owning property. When they don't own property, they don't have collateral, which is required from the banks that want to lend to them. A lot of women are also unable to access formal financial services and rely mostly on informal services, which means they lack credit history, which works against them when it comes to accessing finance. And also many credit scoring and risk assessment systems have implicit bias against women. We also see that women continue to bear a larger burden of unpaid care work, and also social infrastructure like public transportation are not designed to be responsive to the needs of women. And many jurisdictions have in many jurisdictions, there's inadequate investment in childcare service, in elderly care service, which continues to put the burden of unpaid care work on the women. Looking at women also have been blocked from accessing many markets. Many markets are not easy for women to access. When we look at the export market, when we look at public procurement, that's a key one, actually. Very few women-owned businesses participate in public procurement. Digital inclusion as well. We see that the high cost of digital devices and internet data as a deterrent to women's digital inclusion, low levels of digital literacy amongst women and girls, and social norms which continue to prioritize men's access to the digital space over women continue to reduce women's digital inclusion. And so what are the things we should be doing to address some of these challenges? We need to repeal discriminatory laws. We need to ensure that our laws at all levels of society are in line with international declarations and conventions such as CEDAW. We need to fund legal aid to increase access to legal services to women. We need to fast track GBV cases, have special courts or special dispute resolution mechanisms for GBV cases so that justice is speedily served, and also ensuring that our police and our prosecutors and defenders are trained in survivor-centered policing and prosecuting practices. Increasing women's representation in our law enforcement and judicial and legal sectors is also key. Access to finance, expanding the category of what is acceptable as collateral. So allowing the acceptance of movable collateral such as inventory and equipment, data transparency, requiring our financial institutions to report on sex disaggregated data so that we can see how many women are actually accessing their services and their products. Revising credit underscoring, credit underwriting and risk assessment models to remove any inherent or implicit gender bias, and scaling digital financial services, especially to women in the rural areas, will be key to improving women's inclusion in the economic sphere. Investing in childcare. By investments in quality and affordable childcare will help to reduce the unpaid care work on burden, making sure parental leave is enforced, paid parental leave is enforced and required of both parents, not just women, but of both parents, promoting flexible and remote working policies, providing safe transport, and then providing targeted digital skills training to women will be key to improving women's participation in the workforce and in the business sphere. Other things that we can look at, other things that should be done, gender responsive budgeting. Our budgets, national government budgets at all levels, or governments at all levels should adopt gender responsive budgeting to ensure that they take a careful look at how fiscal policies affect women differently. They should also be required to track and publish sex disaggregated data for monitoring and evaluation, and finance ministry officials should be trained and upskilled when it comes to gender responsive budgeting, gender responsive procurement. This is a space where many women-owned businesses are excluded from, and it represents 10 to 15% of global GDP. So setting targets to our government MDAs for the amount of procurement that is done through women-owned businesses is key. Simplifying the bid procedure so that it is not too cumbersome for small businesses where the women-owned businesses tend to operate, not too cumbersome for small businesses to bid for government contracts, and prompt payment so that providing goods and services to government does not become a cash flow constraint for women-owned businesses. To close the digital gap, we need to subsidize access, subsidize the cost of digital devices, subsidize the cost of data to make them more affordable to women, promote targeted digital skills interventions targeted to, for women. I'm currently part of an organization that is working to train 10,000 young African women in digital skills. So encouraging and promoting such programs is key. And then strengthening laws against online harassment and bullying, as well as online fraud, are very key. Expanding women's access to export markets through training, upskilling, business development service provision, reducing bias and harassment from customs and immigration officials are very, very key.